Supposedly's recording.
Great. So I'm David, and this is, I'm trying to do something on LED lighting. So I've actually made a holdout, or a handout for this, and I don't know if I have enough. I just made a few. Terry, why don't you pass it around? Maybe some of you guys can share it. So LEDs, why do I use LEDs? At first, several years ago, I would use these grain of wheat type incandescents, and they're very easy to work with. All you do is apply power, but the problem is they burn out real quick. So who wants to build a model and then after a while it burns out and it really doesn't work? So we moved on to the LEDs. LEDs are light-emitting diodes, as you read in the flyer here. And there's a positive, which is an anode, and a cathode. And let's see if I have a box of LED stuff here. Basically, it looks like this. So you can, I have an LED tester. You can test out the light. In this case, it's a red light. And the beauty about this tester is that you can change your amperage and such and see how well that LED would work. So I mentioned that the only problem with LEDs is that you have to get the polarity correct. And also, you need to have something that's called a resistor. So a resistor actually resists the power and levels out the current that goes into the LED. So on your handout that I gave you, there is a formula which is going to help you figure out just, it says resistance equals the Vs minus 2V over, in this case it was 0.02 amps. So the amount of amps, when you buy the LED, it'll tell you how many amps are in this LED. You can plug that in there, how much voltage that's being the typical, the voltage in the LED, and then how much voltage you want to apply. So that will give you a resistance, and then that will tell you what resistor you should use. And what they've done on the right side, I guess, is actually show you the typical, if it's 2 volts, and a 0.02 amps, they'll show you the 6 volts will give you 200 ohms, 9 volts is 360 ohms, and 12 volts is 510 ohms. So you can use that as a guide. The other thing that you need to realize is that there's a couple of ways of hooking in your LEDs, and you don't want to do what it says here is series. That would be hooking up a leg to another leg, doing plus and minus, and doing as what I consider a daisy chain.
Christmas tree light.
Right, and when one of those bulbs go out, the whole thing goes out. You don't want to do that. You want to do it in parallel, basically on bigger models like this Millennium Falcon. I ran lights, kind of like a cabling to each one of these, and so that each part of the model had its own special power cord. So it's all done with one 9-volt battery, and that goes out throughout the entire ship. So let's move on. I'll probably just stay close to what the handout has. I've listed about 3 different places or actually 4 different places on the other side, where I get my LEDs, because a lot of these you can pick up at stores. But Marvac is one of them. They're in Costa Mesa. There's Ford Electronics, this is another smaller electronics place. Buena Park is what it says. JK Electronics, very, very good. It's the top of my list of where I buy a lot of my electronics. They have a lot of good selection. It's clean, it's well organized. But if you want to go online, without a doubt, Electronic Gold Mine. Electronic Gold Mine sells for the electronic guy that wants to build robots and all kinds of gizmos and gadgets, and that's kind of like what I like to do and what I love to do. So I do a lot of commerce with Electronic Gold Mine. And so I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what, other types. In this Millennium Falcon, those are banks of 4 LEDs that are all blue, and I've actually hooked those up to give it a look like an engine glowing. This kit was probably one of my first real big LED projects. Basically, I went to like Voodoo Electronics and some of the other places that offered pre-done kits, and I said, what do they do? And then I got to do it better. So I went hog wild, and the cockpit's lit up, the front headlights, the rear is done without actually taking away from the model itself. All the landing gear bays are lit, there's light for the gantry. So I didn't, and then there's a LED that's called a rainbow LED. It's a special LED that actually glows in these multiple colors. I've chose that a couple times because it's an interesting effect. I used it for the Y-wing. Kind of gives that glow effect of its thrusters, but it's really simple. All you do is supply power to it. There's no 555 timer or any other circuit you have to add to it. All you do is just plug it in some voltage, and this is actually a bigger LED that actually is a rainbow LED. I bought it with no real intention of any idea what I was going to do with it, but it's there when I need it in my box. So I want to move on to other effects. Like what I really try to do is, like for this, Y-wing is actually, the battery pickups are in here on the arms. So there's no wires per se to the model. So when I lay it down on these arms, hopefully it picks up. Never on TV. There we go. Anytime you knock it, it goes off. But that was one of my signature things that I did, that I wanted to be able to separate the model from the battery source. In the Millennium Falcon, I had the ability to hide the battery. Unfortunately, it's just the one battery, and a lot of those lights consume it, and it only lasts for about 2 or 3 hours, and then I've actually had a battery almost like decay because it was using it so much. So. The other thing that I've done with LEDs is gone to it's called a LED flasher, and that would be, so the engines in this Viper are flashing at you. That effect was done by the last thing I have on my handout. It's a LM3909, and basically that is a very small chip bought some of these. It's a 8-pin chip. At one time they were able to buy these at Radio Shack, but last time I walked into a Radio Shack and asked them for an integrated circuit, the guy goes, "What?" They wanted to sell me a phone. You have to go out to the internet, but these are very small chips, and they basically are very nice done because they don't use a lot of power. You can run a LED for like 2 years on with two AA or D batteries. So it doesn't use a lot of power, which is a very nice feature. What I've done is I've actually, this schematic, which is called a schematic diagram, I've actually built, and I've actually put it onto this, it's called a perforated board, and I made my own little test circuit. So part of the test circuit is getting this board. I bought this at JK Electronics for like 50 cents. More importantly is I bought one of these integrated circuits. There's 16 pins, you only have 8, you don't use them all. These are very important. Why? Because when you're doing soldering, you don't want to get heat onto the integrated circuit, or else you burn it out. So if you do all your soldering, and let me point out another thing is there's less than 10 connections on this board. So if your fear is electronics and soldering and you don't know how to do it, well, there's not that much here, and it's a very powerful circuit. So we'll go into that later, but this it's very important to not get enough heat on your components and short them out. So what I've done is when I apply power to my board, we get a nice machine gun effect, I guess. It's about the same thing that's going on with this Viper. It's a blue light. Everyone can see that? So that's one effect that this board has. But you say, well, I want to light up my K7 space station from Star Trek, and it's kind of like a beacon effect. I don't like this, let's try something different. So what you can do is we're going to get a bigger capacitor. And I have it marked between the capacitors are polarity sensitive, and I have it so that I can figure it out which way it goes. So that goes a little bit faster. So this board will have the ability to do whatever I decide to do just by changing out the capacitors. So I always thought that was neat. If you want to do something a little slower, like I don't know, a light tower or something like that. Goes a little bit faster, doesn't it? But you guys get the point. Depending on what type of capacitor you get, I get huge capacitors, it goes a lot slower. You can change your, whatever you're going to put into it, what do you decide to, whatever you use at that day. So kind of a unique tool, kind of gave you a little bit of a little heads up on, you don't, these circuits are only, they're about $5 a piece. For under $10, you can get your own little lighting effect in your model. So I wanted to do, kind of explain all the things you have to do with getting your kits, putting maybe lights in it, but maybe you don't understand soldering. So I wanted to just do a simple thing, is put two wires together and just show you how to do a soldering in a simple tutorial. So the best way to do it, the X-Acto blade going away from you, you want to strip it. And I'm going to join a white and a yellow. So basically I have two bare wires. And one other thing that's very important and what I use a lot is something called heat shrinkable tubing. They come in different sizes, a lot of thicker ones for bigger gauge, longer tubes. You can get these at Fry's Electronics, but I like these smaller ones. You can probably cut these in half. They use it for two sets of wires. Very useful. Very important though, you put it on the wire first. I'm going to intertwine this wire and my trusty soldering iron. This is a soldering station that I have here. Probably don't need to buy something this expensive. You can go something a little bit cheaper. But the way I do a lot of soldering, it's came in handy. I use soldering iron made for electronics. Don't use the one you use for plumbing. It'll screw your electronics up. And what I do is I try to get it a little bit hot. And then rub the solder over it. I don't know if you're looking at that. Sometimes touching it. It's important to get whatever you're trying to solder hot first. And the solder acts like a glue. And it's going on the different surfaces. Always clean your tip. Make sure your tips last a little longer. And as you can see, that's soldered together. That's not going to come apart. You can pull hard, but I like to do the extra step. I don't want anything to short on this thing. So I carefully put the heat shrinkable tubing over it. And since it's heat shrinkable tubing, I get my trusty lighter, and it shrinks to the diameter, and that was really thin to begin with anyway. But if you take that, you're pulling that pretty hard, whether you're doing electronic models or you're doing soldering your car or stereo or something around the house. That's a very good connection. That's not going to break on you, and it's not going, especially the way I cut the wires, you see how I cut away from me. I didn't use my, using these to cut off and strip it. That I've actually, you damage the wire and eventually that'll come off and it'll break. Doing it with the X-Acto knife I found is probably the best way without actually having your screw up on your, or eventually it'll come apart. You don't want that. This is a good connection. It's not going to screw up later on. So limiting errors up front, have less errors down the road. I want to show you one more thing. People often ask me, you know,
Question?
yes.
You didn't use any flux?
This stuff here has got flux in it. It's usually it's in the center of it. You don't really need to do that. This is made for electronics. So the stuff I guess you use for plumbing, you put flux around it, and yeah, you wouldn't want to use that. This Nautilus kit, there's companies out there. One of them is which it's called Voodoo Electronics. I went out and bought their kit for this model. I bought it on sale, so I didn't pay a lot of money for it, which is kind of the reason why I brought it here to show you guys. With it, you get a handy-dandy circuit board, which is 700 something like that. You also get, you know, wire, which is similar to that, and so we're getting a bunch of resistors and heat shrinkable tubing. Well, we got that, and electrical connectors. I think the best thing about this kit was its flathead LEDs, which would go nicely in this type of kit, which is probably the reason why I bent and bought this. I would probably do it my own way and use these LEDs because they're nice. So the moral of the story is even though there's these companies that supply you all this stuff, you can still go out there and buy just about the same stuff depending how serious you are and do it yourself. For these kits tend to go for relative to how much you can go out and buy these mail order. So people often ask me, hey, what do you think about this and that? I said, well, it's kind of expensive. Why don't you just go out and buy your own stuff? And my pet peeve is this board. All your resistors have to go into this board, and then from here they have to go to the model. So like this, the flying sub, I've actually seen the kit for that. That's more difficult. You can run the resistors in parallel or within the LED, and then run your circuit all the way around the edge of the flying sub, and have it. You wouldn't have to worry about using this because everything has to go in it and it has to go out. So I mean, there's different ways of doing it, and they really, I was a little bit pissed off because they don't tell you how they did it. They don't give you how they ran the wires through the octopus. Kind of like what I've done here. I was looking for more intuitive answers, and I wasn't getting it from the instructions. They say, well, here's how you hook up the model, and that's it. So lessons learned. Just because you go out and get these nice kits, they're aftermarket and all that. They seem to be okay, but you're at risk. So that is where I wanted to kind of finish off. Is there any questions I can answer?
Yes, if Harrison Ford crashes your Millennium Falcon at Santa Monica Airport, are you able to easily repair the LEDs and wiring?
Me? Oh, I can do anything. Yeah, no problem.
You have screws holding them out?
Yeah, the Millennium Falcon was quite a project for me. The reason why I bought it because it was one of the first models I did. I just attacked the model. I didn't care about I didn't do any kind of math. I just said, it's got to, this part here has to have 9 volt, this part has 9 volt, and I didn't, you'll see this as the model goes further on in the evening, the rear lights will blink, go like this, because the rainbow LED is actually pulling on the battery. So I've had this at a show, and I think the funny part was, some guy says, "So how'd you get the thing to light like that? What'd you do? Use a 555 timer, and you did all, you put all this stuff in there, and it's incredible. How'd you do it?" I said, it's kind of a mistake, really. The battery is not lasting long, and I have a rainbow LED in there is just drawing all the power, and that's it. He had a good laugh. To him it was a good thing. So you don't have to overcomplicate the models. You just have to have fun with it.
So you can't get back into the model if something goes wrong without breaking it.
I actually, the two halves are put together with Elmer's glue, so if I was careful and pried them off very slowly, probably could, but I would probably not want to do that. Any more questions?
No, I was just looking at your list of suppliers here. Have you ever tried Orvac Electronics? Right here in Orange Store, and they have a lot of stuff that.
You know what? I go there a lot too. I just didn't have their card when I did that. My bad. Actually, I just bought a solenoid from them, and it was just one of the best solenoids I ever got from them. So my bad. But when I did that, I didn't have their card. So.
Just enough you've heard of them.
Oh yes, I've been there. They have a lot. There's like the second best.
They have a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, have you worked with really small ones like SMD, the Cypress Found,
I've seen them. I haven't used them because you're kind of limited on your tip of your. It's hard to use that stuff. And the other part is when you start using it, where do you put it? Because it's so small, it doesn't give you enough light. So it's kind of like, yeah.
I was trying to get some Cypress Found ones for the 144 scale airliner. And the 144 scale, there's a company called Engineering, I think. N and GINE, whatever. And they supply those Cypress Found stuff for the N scale railroad people, which is 1/160th scale. And they have scale, lighting for streets and stuff like that.
There's certainly a lot of product out there to look at, so yeah. We take one more question, I think then we're gonna get to Joe.
Dave, any problem of heat buildup in an enclosed model?
Not with LEDs. I never had a problem, never had to worry about that. Incandescents, yeah. LEDs, they don't really get that hot. So I never ever had a problem.
Do you paint the whole inside of the model black or silver or white to improve the lighting, or because a lot of guys they'll black so the light doesn't
Okay,
come
so
to the body, right?
I'm working on a Enterprise, and that would be a kit that you would have to do that. So we'd had to do a couple shades of white and then or black,
black and then white.
and then white, so that you don't get bleed through.
Right.
But this type of model didn't really lend to that because we're not doing, I was really lighting stuff from the outside, and it's not fully done. So one more, yes.
Is there a framework for mounting all those lights, or do you have to drill your own holes?
Got to drill my own holes. I got to get my own connectors. Something like this. That's my own electrical connector. So there's a connector inside there that I actually had to mount to. And then adapt it to the model. So there are some artwork, I guess, as far as putting things together. But it all, it's all part of the craft, I guess. It's just trying to figure it out, and that's part of the fun.
It's another demo.
Yeah. So let me turn this off and we'll get to the next one.